Okay, good morning.
Good morning, Robert.
Good morning. Okay, let's get started. Okay, let's get finished with this Tishah thing, right? We should play our cards right. Should have to do this again. Right. Okay. So Tishah B'av. Let's talk about what happened. So we talked about the four fasts, right? But Tishah B'av is the big one of the four. The four fasts are the ones that center around the day of Gedalia, so the day after Rosh Hashanah. 10th of Teves, that's the shortest one, a few days after Hanukkah. 7th of Tammuz, which we had just about 3 weeks ago, and the 9th of Av, which we have starting tomorrow night. Those are the set of four. But Tishah B'av is the only one that's a full day fast, so we observe it for the full 24, really 25 hours, let's say. Starts at sundown and ends at nightfall, like Yom Kippur, like Shabbos for that matter. It is not a biblical fast day. Obviously, it commemorates events that happened after the Torah was given, so by definition it's rabbinic. But in structure, it's the same as Yom Kippur. So first of all, in terms of the length of the fast, full day fast, night and day, and in terms of the complete set of restrictions that include not only eating and drinking, but the other ones like leather shoes, like washing, like putting on perfume and creams, all things that exist in Yom Kippur as well, and are also for Tishah B'av. In concept, interestingly enough, if you read the halacha, it talks about the idea that really on all the fast days, there would be a basis to do the same thing, to do it for a full 24 hours and to observe all restrictions, but it's not the common practice. Only pious individuals do that. I don't know if anyone actually does it today. It probably is. But in practice, other fasts, we don't do those things. We only do it morning to night, and only eating and drinking are restricted. Whereas Tishah B'av Yom Kippur, we have all the other restrictions apply. Yes.
Okay, question. But when we Brian, Hashem would say like why?
Right.
So how is it only
right. So it's true that the basis of Tishah, we talk about 5 things. The 17th of Tammuz commemorates 5 things. The first one of them is biblical. Moshe broke the tablets of the 10 Commandments. Tishah B'av similarly commemorates 5 things, and the first one of them is biblical. That the spies, which is mentioned in the Torah, they came back from exploring the land, and based on what they said and the people's reaction, everyone got demoralized and started crying, so we don't want to go into the land. And it's not an accident that episode, it was an episode of Lashon Hara. It was used to speech in a negative way to bring about bad results. It was about speaking Lashon Hara, believing Lashon Hara. It was also about a rejection of the land of Israel, specifically. So all those things play out in the later destruction of the temple. Jews speak Lashon Hara, they're exiled from the land, and so there's a connection there. And the first time in history that Tishah B'av appears is in that incident. That is a biblical incident. Nevertheless, there's no evidence that it was observed as a fast day at that time, or at least, from what we know, the fast day, right? That destruction of the temple. As a matter of fact, I believe that these fasts that are mentioned in the prophets, and that obviously was before the destruction of the second temple, because that happened several hundred years after the last of the prophets. So when these fasts are first mentioned, and all 4 of them are mentioned, is the fast of the 4th month, 5th month, the 7th month, and the 10th month. Those are the 4 months. They're all mentioned again by the last of the prophets, which is obviously because they commemorate things that happened in the first temple. Now the destruction that we commemorate on Tishah B'av with both temples were on the 9th of Av. But let's say the 17th of Tammuz is the day that the wall was breached. So actually, it's significant that in the prophet it talks about the fast of the 4th month. Tammuz is the 4th month. It doesn't say what day of the month, because the truth is that in the first temple, the breach, I believe, happened there's a summer. It was actually a different day of the month, but we know they weren't going to make two different fasts, and the second destruction was of greater significance to us. So we only commemorate the day that the second destruction happened. So, all the fast of Gedalia was exclusively an event that happened in the first temple. Gedalia only lived once, right? The 10th of Teves also was exclusively the day that Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, began his siege. So the only two that really commemorate both temples equally were Tishah B'Av and 17th of Tammuz. And even 17th of Tammuz is really two different days in two different temples. So there's, like everything else, and we see this a lot in Tishah B'Av even further, there's a lot of overlapping layers of history. And the other events that happened also, there were 5 events on each of those 2 days. The first temple, second temple were 400, almost 500 years apart. The city of Beitar was destruction that happened more than a century after the temple. And we talk about today 2 other very significant events that very strikingly happened on the same day. One was the expulsion from Spain in 1492, a real turning point in Jewish history. And the second one was the outbreak of World War I, another real turning point in world and Jewish history. So we don't consider these to be accidents. Tishah B'Av is all about the Jewish calendar is about cycles repeating themselves. It's interesting that people make the point, I read this, that I think even secular scholars make the point that there's something that we take so for granted and we don't realize how unique they are. And maybe if these ideas are universal, it's because the world got them from the Torah. But one of those examples is that in the pagan world, which is very religious, quote unquote, and they were very focused on their gods, but they had some things in their worldview were very much aligned with things that you'll find in atheism or secular philosophy. So one of them was the idea of the endless cycle, the circle of life, the cycle of life. And in the pagan concept, there might have been gods, but there's an endless cycle of birth, death, rebirth, endless, even if they believe in spiritual sounding things like reincarnation, it was just one after the other. And maybe a cycle you want to escape from eventually, but there was no concept of the idea of the linear view of history, that history actually has a start and an end, and actually has a point to it. And there's actually, there's a plot, and we're working towards something. We have a goal. That's a Jewish idea, the idea of actually creating man for a purpose. But for man and for a purpose, a mission that he gave to man, an idea that man, like any good story, things go get worse before they get better, but that ultimately there's a resolution and that there's a climax and that there's a storyline here with a happy ending. That's a Jewish idea, a Torah idea. So Tishah B'Av, there's a lot of cycles, but the whole point of Tishah B'Av is that it's a cycle of darkness, but the whole point is that we recognize that this is all taking us somewhere. So it's more of a spiral. It's not like an endless merry-go-round. It's more of a spiral. But these things keep on happening again and again. And as we go through the readings of Tishah B'Av, we find out that things that happened 1,000 years ago in the Rhineland were parallel to things that happened 2,000 years ago under the Roman Empire, and things that happened 100 years ago in Germany. Those things are not. The point isn't, there we go again. Like now, even now, in the last 2 years, you'd say, for people who are not clued into Jewish history, it's like, either they're shocked. A lot of people are just shocked. And for people who have long enough memories, I don't think there are any people like that anymore. People who have long enough memories, it just opens up the old wounds and brings back the bad memories. But if you have a real understanding of Jewish history, you just, you recognize the pattern and you understand the pattern. One of the, again, there are also hidden aspects of the Torah viewpoint that maybe we take for granted. We don't recognize that they're not obvious. They're not inherent to a worldview. So the idea that, the secular worldview is history, is a story of progress, human progress and achievement. Anytime, even the history of modern Israel, right? It's a story of, it starts with the Holocaust, that's the low point, and then we build up. Now we have a free country and a state and more technology. And then if there's a setback, if there's anti-Semitism, once again the UN decides they don't accept us. Even we thought we were doing everything right, and they still don't accept us. It becomes very demoralizing because after all that, or even from the secular world, after all that progress, society is still capable of acting like barbarians. They still have fighting wars. They're still capable of being at each other's throats and being polarized and not tolerating each other. From a Jewish perspective, it's exactly the opposite. It's like that famous story slash maybe it's a real story. The rabbi is on the plane with the rabbi and the professor, and the professor says, "Why is your grandchild so respectful, and mine is not?" And he says, "To my grandchild, I'm 2 generations closer to Har Sinai, and to your grandchild, you're 2 generations closer to a monkey." So that difference of a worldview is it's not obvious to people. We don't think of it because it's so under the radar. But from a Jewish perspective, every time we open, if you open a Mishnah Brura, if you open a Chumash, you see how rabbis quote the rabbis of the previous time period, or even the previous generation, with such reverence, as it's unquestionable. It doesn't mean they don't try to tear the words apart and challenge and understand it, but the sense of respect and absolute awe, and it goes whether it's the Chafetz Chaim talking about the Vilna Gaon, the Vilna Gaon, everywhere. We walk around with that consciousness. So we say that the world, Hashem created the world, and think about the flood, think about Abraham Avinu, the generation of the tower. But the world is a series of kind of sliding and further and further away from there are high points coming out of Mitzrayim, getting the Torah, but the world is a series of descents. It's kind of those generations get weaker. We drift further from Mount Sinai, not only in terms of time, but in terms of quality. The accumulated mistakes of humankind and of Jews as well. But even more than that, I think there's something even more fundamental. This is Kabbalah, so I won't offer you a lot of insight or even knowledge. But it might even be a Gemara actually. Say Ben David, Amen David Ba, Mashiach won't come out until all the souls in the body are finished. So what does that mean? So I think there's a Kabbalistic idea that the creation of the first man, who was described as being enormous, gigantic in proportions, and one end of the world to the other, whatever that means, his existence encompassed his essence encompassed all souls of all humankind. Like a bottle, God is pulling souls out and putting them into the world one at a time. We're down like at the toenails at this point. Till all the souls in the body had been used up, till every soul that was contained in that initial creation is placed on this world. So we believe it's not even necessarily a critique, but the world is, the Chomas Halava says somewhere, it's a nice trend. You don't think of it, it's not the kind of work that, if you ever read Chomas Halava, which we have anyway in translation from the original Judeo-Arabic, so it's not an easy read, and it's certainly not known for snappy style, but he has certain lines, so once in a while, he says, Yosef ha'olam binyan Yosef ha'feichel chorban. Something like that. Basically, it says the building up of the world has led to an unraveling of the human mind. Essentially, the more they built up the world, the more their minds become. That was back then. This was about 800 years ago or something. Imagine what it's today with today's technology. So it's partly the very progress. It's external progress. A society creates technology. Someone called it a modern writer in English. An improved means to an unimproved end. Society finds better ways of doing the same nonsense that it always tried to do. So, to entertain yourself, you have to go out in town square and chase women or whatever. Now they just do it online. It's not hard. So you want to gossip, you have to go to the tavern or gather with your friends for a cup of coffee. Now you just send out a tweet and you got 1 million people who will see it. Correct. That's exactly the idea. Mankind and even Jewish kind. Now, the Chafetz Chaim has an idea. Okay, so let's analyze that for a couple of different ways. I was reading by Rabbi Aaron Feldman, the Rosh Yeshiva Bnei Yisrael. He's the brother of Rabbi Emmanuel Feldman from Atlanta. So they both write very well. Rabbi Aaron Feldman has a book called The Eye of the Storm. We called it a calm view of raging issues. He tackles things like feminism, homosexuality, all kinds of other fun, state of Israel, all kinds of fun topics. But he makes this point. He analyzes a pretty famous Gemara, a description of the end of days, and it talks about the generation before Mashiach. There'll be a lot of inflation. There'll be no respect of the young for the old, and like all kinds of things. Sound like they come out of the New York Times. They come out right. he tries to explain it all, and he says, like, what's the common? He gives a whole bunch of different things. There's a lot of wine, but people are still unhappy, and there's a lot of inflation, and the government is heretical, and the gathering places are all promiscuous, and there's the generations like a dog, and a whole bunch of different things. So he basically says, look, the whole purpose of creation is for man to be tested and to find the truth. God says everything's created for the glory of God. God doesn't need our glory. But what it means is that we are meant to recognize, to have, it's really for us. And we reach fulfillment and happiness and peace and all the blessing God can give us when we recognize that God is the source of it all. Right? We have to choose that and achieve that through our effort, that recognition. The alternative is that we either live our lives building an awareness of God, or we live our lives building an awareness of ourselves. Right? Who will be the king, God or us? That's the whole history of human existence in a nutshell. Because in order for this story to be fully realized, he says it very beautifully. I don't remember the exact words. God has to grant man the ability to soar to the highest heavens, penetrate to the most microscopic levels of atomic existence, and unravel all the secrets of human nature and conquer every aspect of the physical world. And still, when man can do all of that and realize that he still has not told how to be happy, how to live, that's when man will recognize that there only is one answer, and that's God. But God gives man all of those abilities. So in a certain sense, the progress of society is necessary, and the whole point of it is that all these things do not make us better people, cannot make us better people. And this is a particular, when we talk about the history, and we as Jews, we know this because this started in, I'm not a historian, but when the church started, the foundations of the Catholic Church started to crack, and the Protestantism, Enlightenment, the Renaissance. I think it was, I'm not the wrong order on that. I think it was the Renaissance, then the Reformation, and then the Enlightenment, different phases, emancipation of the Jews. Society gradually turned its back first on Catholicism, then on the church altogether, to a large extent. And so they got this idea that human progress will solve everything. It's big. They've already kind of, I think, gotten past this to some extent now. It's postmodernism, nothing matters anyways. Just tear everything down, and that's what we're up to now. I think it's already, they're like reaching the bottom of the slope. But there was you read, if you all went to school, right? The glorious age of discovery, and then they had those people in the 1700s who had, discovering, mapping the globe and discovering things like gravity, and people have this sense that, one day all wars will be ended and all unhappiness will be cured because we'll know everything. Right? And my Rosh used to say that the guy Plato writes that knowledge alone is not enough to restrain the power of the passion. And they were pretty advanced, the Greeks. They forgot everything, and they rediscovered discovered more stuff. But so I remember the Rosh said, let's run away from the establishment. We'll go to a meeting. And the problem is the Sahara is in the commune also. He says the establishment is inside yourself. And if the human being doesn't change, nothing's going to work. But people forget that lesson again and again. And to a large extent, mankind, you can't fault them. They don't have, they don't know what the alternative is. We do. So we should know better. That's the idea. Yes. Certainly a test. Again, in some ways, maybe it causes the problems. Because, again, people don't have to work as hard. It says in Pirkei Avos, right? Talmud Torah and Derech Eretz, worldly involvement are good because together, you forget sin. But when they told AI is the latest iteration of that. But basically, the more we come up with time-saving conveniences, everyone's busy and we're doing things, and some important things taking up more of our time. They used to be worked very, very hard. It was just a historical reenactment on Park Avenue on Sunday, and it's actually a Jewish girl that shines how they used to grind the herbs with the mortar and pestle. Like, wow, that's why we can't take Tylenol on Shabbos. That's exactly the reason. But she said, idleness was considered a sin, and if you were a child, if you weren't doing anything, you were put to work. Yeah. But you had time to think. Your mind could wander, and when you were done with your chores, you might. Now, no one has time to think because no one would sit there with a mortar and pestle grinding herbs. You buy that from the store, so you have all the time in the world to put things on your social media, and that you can do all the time. That never expires. Yeah, and that never expires, and you never run out of things to do. So no one has any time for anything. So again, the point being that our vision of, ironically, the Torah gives us a real vision of hope, but it's not human progress that does it. It's despite human progress that we have hope. Yeah.
People who want to monetize.
A lot of it's driven by money. A lot of it is driven by money. That's exactly the point. People would say yes and no. It's certainly true. Right? America is the ultimate example of that because it's the land of money. And I remember one of my rabbis would say this, that even a secular European society, for example, at least back go back a couple generations, they valued a violinist, a chess player, or a mathematician. At least it represents something that's a human value. In America, the culture of money, sports, they don't even human thing. There's just, we talk about godless side on the greatness of the human spirit. Even in the secular field, there is a value to human dignity and celebrating the qualities that at least that sets man apart from an animal. But when you get to the point where you're just about pleasure and physical pleasure, but at the same time, we also believe that money is more than, there is something in money that's more than just animalistic, and that's Chazal explained that Yesh Lamana wrote on the side. A person has 100, they want 200, they want to double it. That is not a phenomenon that's found in the animal kingdom. And you have to, when you read Musar literature, they use words like desire, and the words are used in different ways. It doesn't always mean the same thing. And we all, as human beings, have physical desires, and those are limited. Right? No one says you have a piece of cake, you want two, and when you eat two, you want four, when you have four, you want eight. That's not the way it works. I had a friend who said, don't you want to just eat 50 cookies? Like, no, I don't get full. So, well, I just want to keep. Some people have different metabolisms, but for most people, at a certain point, you don't want to eat anymore. At least not so a few hours later. And the flip side of that is that those are not considered human weaknesses, and they're weaknesses, but they're not human faults. Nowhere will you find, and this is the sefer which says you should